Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gopinath, Shri Radhe. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Shrikrishna Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charnaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtatarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samaveta Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This morning we are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 7, Further Inquiries by Vidura, text number 13. Yadendriyo paramotha Yadendriyo paramotha Drashtratmani pareharo Drashtratmani pareharo Viliyante tada kleshaha Viliyante tada kleshaha Samsuptasyeva kritsnashaha Samsuptasyeva kritsnashaha Yadendriyo paramotha Drashtratmani pareharo Viliyante tada kleshaha Samsuptasyeva kritsnashaha Yadendriyo paramotha Drashtratmani pareharo Viliyante tada kleshaha Samsuptasyeva kritsnashaha
Samsuptasyeva kritsnashaha Yadendriya paramotha Drashtratmani pareharo Viliyante tada klesha Samsuptasyeva kritsnashaha
Yada, when Indriya, senses, Uparamaha, satiated, Atha, thus, Drashtra Atmani, onto the seer, the supersoul, Pare, in the transcendence, Haro, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Viliyante, become merged in, Tada, at that time, Kleshaha, miseries, Samsuptasya, one who has enjoyed sound sleep, Eva, like, Kritsnashaha, completely. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. When the senses are satisfied in the seer, supersoul, the personality of Godhead, and merge in Him, all miseries are completely vanquished as after a sound sleep. Purport. The quivering of the living entity is, as described above, is due to the senses. Since the entire material existence is meant for sense gratification, the senses are the medium of material activities, and they cause the quivering of the steady soul. Therefore, these senses are to be detached from all such material activities. According to the impersonalists, the senses are stopped from work by merging the soul in the Supersoul Brahman. The devotees, however, do not stop the material senses from acting, but they engage their transcendental senses in the service of the transcendence, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In either case, the activities of the senses in the material field are to be stopped by cultivation of knowledge, and if possible, they can be engaged in the service of the Lord. These senses are transcendental in nature, but their activities become polluted when contaminated by matter. We have to treat the senses to cure them of the material disease, not stop them from acting, as suggested by the impersonalist. In Bhagavad Gita 2.59, it is said that one ceases all material activities only when satisfied by contact with a better engagement. Consciousness is active by nature and cannot be stopped from working. Artificially stopping a mischievous child is not the real remedy. The child must be given some better engagement so that he will automatically stop causing mischief. In the same way, the mischievous activities of the senses can be stopped only by better engagement in relation with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the eyes are engaged in seeing the beautiful form of the Lord, the tongue engaged in tasting prasad or remnants of foodstuff offered to the Lord, the ears are engaged in hearing His glories, the hands engaged in cleaning the temple of the Lord, the legs engaged in visiting His temples, or when all the senses are engaged in transcendental variegatedness, then only can the transcendental senses become satiated and eternally free from material engagement. The Lord, as the Supersoul residing in everyone's heart and as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the transcendental world, far beyond the material creation, is the seer of all our activities. Our activities must be so transcendentally saturated that the Lord will be kind enough to look upon us favorably and engage us in His transcendental service. Then only can the senses be satisfied completely and be no longer troubled by material attraction. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashlakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapte Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha kalpaturubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So in answer to Vidura's question to Maitreya about how the Supreme Personality of Godhead, being transcendental, comes in contact or creates an inferior energy, but how is it that he doesn't get affected? Maitreya Muni answered this question by giving the very nice example of the sun. The sun, being all luminous and very pure, akin to Krishna's spiritual potency. The sun is the source of other inferior energies, as was given in the purport. I think Srila Prabhupada was quoting the example given by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Jiva Goswami. They say that the sun is the source of darkness, snow, rain and clouds. So the sun creates these things, but at the same time the sun is unaffected by these things. And secondly, we discussed about how all of these things, darkness, clouds, rain and snow, they have the ability to cover the luminous rays of the sun. But again, the sun is unaffected because the sun is situated in a higher platform. It only affects the jivas, the conditioned souls, who are tiny, and they're at the bottom, they're below these layers of covering. Okay, so in that way, Krishna is unaffected always, and Krishna can create these inferior energies. That's the definition of superior. Something superior must also contain within it all inferior energies. That's what makes it superior, because it has the superior nature and it has the inferior nature. Something which is inferior doesn't have something which is superior. And these energies, like the false ego and the three modes of material nature, they appear to cover the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And from understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just like the Mayavadis, they think that Krishna's body is made of matter. So these material energies appear to be covering up the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but actually Krishna is transcendental to this. Now, in answer to Vidura's question about the soul, about the jiva, how is it that the pure soul comes into the material world and starts desiring things which are not good for his spiritual advancement, even though Krishna is within the heart? So, a couple of verses ago, Maitreya answered by giving the example of the moon. Now, I thought of just dissecting this example of the moon a bit more, according to how Srila Prabhupada has written the purport. Srila Prabhupada examines this analogy of the moon, and I'll just briefly explain it. The moon is situated in the sky, and its rays, they reflect off the surface of a water, of a pond or a river or something like that. Because influenced by the wind or whatever, the surface of the water is moving. And therefore, the reflection of the moon on the surface of the water appears to be quivering. Srila Prabhupada uses that word even in today's purport. He's used the word quivering. Yesterday's purport began with the quivering quality of material existence, and the purport before that, which was talking about this example of the moon, also used that same word, quivering. So Srila Prabhupada analyzes this analogy in two ways. The first way is that Srila Prabhupada says that you can assume that the full moon in the sky is your soul. When your soul happens to apparently come in contact with Krishna's inferior energy, again, you can take it as the Panchamahabhuta, right? The five material elements. You can take it as the mind, intelligence, false ego. You can take it as influence of time, because time is something which is also changing the body. It's making the body quiver, right? So when the soul, or the moon in the sky, comes in touch with the surface of the water, or Krishna's inferior energy, it appears to be quivering. It appears to be. So same way our bodies, they appear to be changing, our mind, our mood, our desires, everything appears to be quivering and changing all the time. However, just as the moon is situated in the sky unaffected, similarly it is to be understood that even though it looks like the moon is quivering on the water, our soul, deep inside our body, is unaffected by these layers of covering, both the gross layers of covering and the subtle layers of covering. This is one way in which Srila Prabhupada analyzes this analogy of the moon. The second way in which Srila Prabhupada analyzes this analogy is through the lens of a personalist versus an impersonalist understanding. Srila Prabhupada often gives the example of the sun and the sunshine. The sun is the Shaktiman, or the personality which possesses the energy, and the sunshine is the energy, the Shakti. So in the same way, Srila Prabhupada instead of using the sun, he uses the example of the moon. So he says, now we take the moon in the sky as being Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's no longer your individual soul. In this second explanation of the analogy, the moon is Krishna. The moon's rays, the moonshine, the energy, this is the separated part and parcel energy of the moon, which is us, the Tatastha Shakti. Because this moonshine is the energy of the moon, and because the little particles of light are tiny and insignificant compared to the blazing, cooling effulgence of the moon itself, it is possible for the moonshine to become influenced by the quivering nature of the water. So this is the second way in which Srila Prabhupada analyzes is this analogy. The moon is unaffected because the moon is qualitatively the same as the moonshine, but quantitatively it's enormous. But the tiny particles of the moonshine, when they touch the surface of the water, they take on that quivering quality. Therefore, the Tatastha Shakti, when it comes in contact with matter, it has the ability, the matter has the ability to bewilder and to condition the minute, infinitesimal soul, right? And Srila Prabhupada says, however, when the moonshine, it hits different surfaces, like Prabhupada gives an example, is that when the moonshine hits the mountains or the trees, or when it hits the surface of the Taj Mahal, then we can appreciate the beauty, the variegated beauty of all these different material objects. Previously they were dark, they were covered up in darkness. Right? Because if the moon is not there, they're covered up in darkness. But when the moon is there and it's shining its moon rays, and these moon rays hit the body of a tree, hit the body of a mountain, or they hit the body of the Taj Mahal, then we can appreciate the variegated beauty of these dull, inert material objects. But how are we able to appreciate the beauty of these things? It's only when the soul enters the body of these dull material objects can we appreciate the beauty. So in the same way, just as we can't appreciate the beauty of the Taj Mahal when it's covered in complete darkness, we can't appreciate the beauty of a material object if there's no soul inside it. But when the moonshine hits the surface of the Taj Mahal, then we can appreciate the beauty of the Taj Mahal. In the same way that when the soul is inside the body of a tree, or the soul is inside the body of a human being, we can appreciate the beauty of that particular material body, which in reality is actually just dead matter. So when Kamsari Prabhu was giving the class, I asked him the question, why is it that the Mayavadis or the impersonalists, they consider that the reflection of the moon on the surface of the water is as good and identical as the original moon in the sky? So the answer is that the Mayavadis don't see a difference between the energy and the energetic. And I'll explain. So when we say Mayavad, there's actually two different classes of Mayavadi philosophers. One class of Mayavadi philosophers are the Brahma Parinamvadis. And the Brahma Parinamvadis, they say that the original Brahman, okay, they use this verse from an Upanishad. It's called the Chandogya Upanishad, which says, Ekam eva dvitiyam. Ekam eva dvitiyam, which means dvitiyam means the duality. So the duality that we see in this material world, originally, before the creation of this material world, exists as the unchanging, eternal Brahman. So they say that before the creation, only the Brahman existed. So this is their definition of the phrase from the shloka from the Chandogya Upanishad, which says, Ekam eva dvitiyam. Now they say the Brahma Parinamvadis, because Parinam means transform. In Sanskrit, if you translate to English, Parinam means transform. So they accept, this class of Mayavadi philosophers accept that the original Brahman does transform to some degree to create all the duality that we see in this material world. So everything that you see, mountains, trees, rivers, the sky, even the jivas, even the spiritual jivas, they say they're all transformations of the original, complete, whole oneness of the unchangeable Brahman. This is their view. But the fallacy of this proposition, this philosophical proposition, is that if originally everything is Brahman, then where does Maya come from? Because we see that when the creation takes place, and the conditioned souls, the jivas, are within the creation, we can see that the Maya energy actually comes and influences and bewilders and illusions the jivas. Now, if you say that the jivas are Brahman, which is transformed to create everything in this mature world, that means Maya is more stronger than the jivas. Because now Maya is covering up Brahman. So they cannot answer where this Maya energy comes from in that way. So does that make sense? That's the fallacy of their proposition. However, as Vaishnavas, we understand that although the Atma Jivas, the Vibhinamsha Jivas, they are qualitatively in the same as Brahman, or the Parabrahman, Krishna, quantitatively they're tiny, and therefore, because they're tiny, they have the ability to be conditioned by Maya. Whereas Krishna, who is Parabrahman, because he's quantitatively big and the possessor of all energies, he is not able to be covered by Maya. But the Mayavadis, as I was explaining, they don't see a difference between Parabrahman and Brahman. They don't see a difference between Krishna and the jivas. They say the jivas are equal to Krishna. They don't see that quantitative difference. Therefore, when they see that Maya is covering up in illusion the conditioned souls, they cannot explain how is it that Brahman, the Supreme Brahman, is being covered up by Maya. This is one philosophy, one branch of philosophy within Mayavad, the Brahma Parinambadis. The second type of Mayavadi philosophers are the Vivartavadis. Vivarta means illusion. So what the Vivartavadis, they say, they actually quote Shankaracharya, who is known to have said that if one is walking in a dark room and he happens to see a rope lying on the floor, now in that darkness, the person who's walking and sees that rope, he or she may mistake that rope for being a snake and therefore get scared. But it's only when someone turns on the torchlight of knowledge and the person sees, oh, it's actually not a rope, it's actually not a snake, it's a rope. Then they realize, the snake didn't exist in the first place. It was just an illusion. So in the same way, the Vivartavadis say that this material manifestation that we see, including the jivas which are in it, this is all just an illusion. It's not even a transformation of Brahman. It's just an illusion. Brahman exists completely independently and separately from the material creation. The material creation in its entirety, including the jivas which are in it, are simply false. Sorry, the jivas are not false. Sorry, I take that back. The jivas are not false. The material energy, everything within it, that's false. And that's where that famous phrase comes, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. So, but how do we defeat this philosophy? We say that for a person to mistake a rope for being a snake, the snake must have existed in the first place somewhere else. The person must have had some experience, some direct experience of the snake itself for the person to mistake the rope for being a snake. Therefore, the very fact that we as conditioned souls are thinking this mature world to be eternal, the reason why we think this mature world is eternal and that we ourselves, our body itself is going to last forever, because we as the soul deep inside have that original experience within us of living in the spiritual world. We have that original inherent quality within us of Satchitananda. Because we have that experiential quality within us, hidden deep within us, we mistake this mature world to also be like the spiritual world, eternal. The Mayavadis say that one may think that this mature world is eternal, But when one gets enlightened, then one realizes that this material world is just an illusion. Just like when someone turns on the light, one sees that the rope, it's a rope, it's not actually a snake. The idea that it was a snake is an illusion when the light is turned on. Similarly, they say, when one is enlightened with Vedic knowledge, Vedantic knowledge, according to Shariraka Bhashya, they say one will realize that actually this material world didn't exist in the first place. It's just an illusion, just as the snake is an illusion. But the very fact that the snake existed in the first place means that we have some idea that the spiritual world exists separately and independently of the material world before its creation. So these are the two prominent views of or branches of Mayavad philosophy. The Brahma Parinamvadis, who consider the material world to be a transformation of Brahma, and the Vivartavadis, who consider the material world to be completely false and illusory and non-existent. As Vaishnavas, we understand that the material world is true. It's existent, however, it is temporary. In the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, another example is given of the moon. And the example given is that when the moon, sometimes the rays which are coming from the moon at nighttime, a cloud may come. I think this is in the chapter of the autumn season in the 10th canto. So the example is given that a cloud will come and it will block the moon. But the moon rays will come and they'll hit the cloud, and the cloud will have a nice silhouette of moonlight around it. And we will appreciate the beauty of the cloud because of the silhouette of the moonshine around it. But we are only able to appreciate the cloud when the rays of the moon hit it and create that silhouette. In the same way, we can only appreciate all these material bodies when the soul or the moonshine enters into them and illuminates them. So the original energy is coming from the moon. And the moon is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The moonshine is compared to his separated parts and parcels. The dull material energy, matter or Maya, which is the cloud, can only be appreciated when the rays of the moon hit the surface of the cloud. So in the same way, our bodies and anything animate in this material world can be appreciated when there is a presence of the soul inside. There's another nice small story which demonstrates this concept of identity and who we are we matter or are we spirit? So there was a king, and the king had recently, he was very introspective actually, he was very philosophical, and recently one of his relatives had passed away. So the king asked, he was sitting in court and all the assembly was there, and he asked one of his ministers, can you please tell me what happens to the soul after the death of the body? What is the journey of the soul? And specifically, what happens to the soul after the death of the body? So all of a sudden, like when he asked that question to the minister, all of a sudden, because the windows are open in the palace, so all of a sudden, a bird flies from outside through the window into the palace, through the assembly, and there's another open window on the other side of the palace, and it just flies outside of the window. So the minister asks the king, did you see that? And the king says, yes. And the minister replies, this is the journey of the soul. The soul at one point in time existed outside of the material body, outside of the confines of matter, just as the bird existed before it flew into the palace. It existed outside of the palace. Then for a temporary period of time, the bird came and was existing within the confines of the palace. But after the death of the body, what did the bird do? It flew out from the window and went outside the palace again. So in the same way, the soul exists independently in the beginning from matter. For some period of time, while it's conditioned, it exists within the confines of matter, just as the bird is present within the palace, the walls of the palace, and then eventually the bird flies out. So when the soul is liberated, again it exits, or even at the time of death. The soul exits the body at the time of death. Now, I'm not sure if you've had experiences of birds flying into your house. Sometimes you leave the window open. I remember sometimes it used to happen in the temple. Sometimes miners, the miner birds, they used to come from the door. That's why we have a sign on the door that says, please keep the door closed, the birds will come in. So the doors sometimes used to come to the foyer. And sometimes I remember once the temple door was open as well. So the miner actually walked into the temple room, and it was flying around from one corner of the ceiling to the other corner of the ceiling. And it was scared. It was scared because it didn't know how to fly outside again. So in the same way, while that bird, if that bird, like going back to that palace example, when the bird which is outside of the palace flies through the window, and then it's inside the walls of the palace, right? But let's say if we all close the windows now, and the bird is stuck inside. What happens to the bird? It gets very frightened and agitated. How am I going to escape? In the same way, if we have that materialistic mentality, that's it. My soul and my body, they're the same thing. My soul, is a creation of this matter. And it's at the time of death, it's not going to escape from my body, and it's not going to go somewhere else. After I die, that's it. I stop existing. Then the soul which is inside a body also gets frightened. Just as that bird which is inside gets frightened because he doesn't know how to escape from the body. So in the same way, it brings that fear as well. So in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying, the quivering of the living entity, as described above, is due to the senses. But not just the senses. The senses are good, but we misuse the senses, as Srila Prabhupada is saying. Since the entire material existence is meant for sense gratification, material existence is meant for sense gratification. These senses are the medium of material activities, and they cause the quivering of the steady soul. So, to perform sense gratification in this material world, we need senses. If our body doesn't possess senses, we can't use the senses for sense gratification. Therefore, these senses are to be detached from all such material activities. According to the impersonalists, the senses are stopped from work by merging the soul in the supersoul, Brahman. The devotees, however, do not stop the material senses from acting, but they engage their transcendental senses in the service of the transcendence, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here again, Srila Prabhupada is making the distinction between the impersonalists, the Mayavadis, and the personalists, the Vaishnavas. We all have senses. And Srila Prabhupada is saying is that the senses are supposed to be used in this material world for sense gratification. Now the Mayavadis say that because this material world is false, then stop sense engagement. Because if you keep using your senses in this material world, you'll just become more and more illusioned. So stop your sense gratification and stop the use of your senses, because even your senses are illusory. Your senses are non-existent. It's just an illusion. As I was saying, the Parinamvadis, the Vivartavadis, they say Brahman has not transformed to form this material world. This material world is an illusion. Only Brahman exists beyond this material world. So when you become liberated, when you get nirvana, you'll realize that actually this material world is false. So therefore they say, stop using your senses. But Srila Prabhupada is saying, what do the devotees do? The devotees realize that this material world is a replica, is a temporary but real replica of the original spiritual world, where you have your original spiritual body with its original perfected spiritual senses. The senses are temporarily covered by matter. But Srila Prabhupada is saying the senses are originally spiritual and transcendental in nature. Therefore the devotees say, don't stop using your senses. Because you have senses originally in your spiritual body. Simply use these senses for Krishna conscious purposes. So both the Mayavadis and the devotees say, don't use your senses for sense gratification in the material world. Don't use them for material sense gratification. But the Mayavadis don't know what to do with the senses, and the devotees know what to do with the senses. This is the distinction. So on that note, Sanatana Goswami, he says, quoting that verse by Lord Brahma in the 10th canto, when Lord Brahma comes and apologizes to Gopal, Krishna, for stealing his cows, his calves, and his cowherd friends. That time he quotes the verse. I don't know the verse, but I know at the end the word used is The words used is tanuvan manobir, saying that stanistitam, stuff like that. So basically Brahma is saying that a devotee can stay in whatever material position they're in, but they should utilize their senses, all their energy in the service of Krishna. How? In three ways. Tanu, Van, and Manobir. Tanu means your body, use your body in Krishna's service. Van means your speech, and Mano means your mind. So Sanatana Goswami explains, because here we're talking about using our senses in Krishna's service. Sanatana Goswami explains that the devotees use their body to touch the lotus feet of Krishna. Just like the pujaris, before dressing Radha Gopinath, they touch the lotus feet of the deities usually, or they may place their head at the lotus feet of the deities. And this is encouraged and advised by Kapila Muni in the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam as well, that the devotee, prays and takes the blessings and the dust of the lotus feet of the deity. So the devotees utilize their bodies like that. The devotees utilize their van, tanu van, their speech, by glorifying Krishna. And their mind, their mana, in always remembering the transcendental form of Krishna. Conversely, the materialists, they cannot understand Krishna through their bodily strength, tanu. They cannot understand Krishna by their verbal expertise, van, and they cannot understand Krishna through their mental speculation, mano. So while the devotees are understanding Krishna through tanuvan manobir, in the same way the karmis are not able to understand Krishna through their tanuvan manobir. But Krishna also, Sanatana Goswami explains, Krishna also is serving the devotees through his tanu. Krishna is serving the devotees through his transcendental body. How? For example, we see when Haridas Thakur was passing away, Haridas Thakur desired to leave his body before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left, because he couldn't bear the separation. When Haridas Thakur left his body chanting Shri Krishna Chaitanya, what did Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu do? He picked up Haridas Thakur's body, and in a loud roaring kirtan, he danced with the body of Haridas Thakur. Or we can cite another example. For example, the queens of Lord Krishna. Let's say Rukmini. She desired to be the wife, the wedded queen of Krishna. So Krishna came and he picked her up and he put her on his chariot and he went away. So in that way, Krishna is engaged also in touching the bodies of his deity, of his devotees, in caressing and embracing the bodies of his devotees. Krishna is engaged in also glorifying his devotees as well. Just like again in Chaitanya Leela, we see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he comes and he glorifies the writing of Rupa Goswami, saying that his writing is like a row of pearls. Right? Or in the Bhagavad Gita, or everywhere else, like for example the Prachetas, Lord Vishnu comes, Sohardama Pritak Dharmas Tushtoham Sohardenava. I'm very satisfied and pleased by your camaraderie in performing devotional service. So Krishna, he is also engaged in glorifying with his mouth his devotees. And within his mind, Krishna is also engaged, his mana, in thinking and remembering his devotees as well. Just like Krishna's devotees can't forget him, Krishna also can't forget his devotees. That's explained in the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Sadho hridayam mayam, sadhunam hridayam toaham. Madanyatyena jananti, naham tebhyo managapi. Right? So I don't know anyone else except for my devotees, and my devotees don't know anyone else except for me. This is explained. I think Vishnu is telling this to Durvasa Muni. Yep, when Durvasa Muni is fleeing away from the Sudarshan Chakra and he finally tries to take refuge in Vaikuntha, this is what Lord Vishnu tells him. So you better go back down and pay obeisances to Ambarish Maharaj and don't come to me because you've offended my devotee. So Krishna is also engaged in thinking of his devotees. When Krishna was away in Dwarka, he left Vrindavan. At that time, in Mathura, Dwarka, at that time he was always remembering the devotees in Vrindavan. So we just finished with a quick story, because towards the end of the purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying that our activities must be so transcendently saturated that the Lord will be kind enough to look upon us favorably and engage us in His transcendental service. So transcendentally saturated. So this is a nice story that I heard from a devotee of a deity of Lord Krishna called Guru Vayurappan. Guru Vayurappan. So this is a deity of Krishna, which is in Kerala, in the state of Kerala, in South India. And although they worship him as Krishna, in fact they worship him as a baby Krishna. But this particular deity, if you look at it, if you look at him, he actually has 4 hands. And he looks exactly like Vishnu. So this deity actually represents, when Krishna took his birth, he had vented in the prison cell of Kamsa. So he was a baby, and Devaki and Vasudeva, they were very afraid for the safety of baby Krishna, because Kamsa would come and also try to kill baby Krishna. So at that time, as we know, Krishna manifested his 4-handed form just to pacify Devaki and Vasudeva, telling them, don't worry, I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kamsa can't do anything to me. So that 4-handed manifestation of Vishnu, which came from the body of little baby Krishna in the prison cell of Kamsa, that's who this deity is, Guru Vayurappan in Kerala. So they worship him as baby Krishna, but actually he looks like Vishnu with 4 hands. So he had a very famous devotee, Punantan, I forgot his name, but he's a very famous devotee of this Guru Vayurappan. So this particular devotee, very simple devotee, simple-hearted devotee, it's explained that every now and then, every week or something, he would make 100-kilometer journey from wherever he lived to visit the temple of Guru Vayurappan, this deity of Krishna. And it was a very arduous journey. And he lived till about 90 years of age or something. And he just used to practice his sadhana, his bhajan. He used to always carry Srimad Bhagavatam with him. He would always be absorbed in glorifying the holy names of Krishna, like that. So, as it happened one day, he decided to leave his place of residence and make that 100-kilometer trek to visit the temple of Guru Vayurappan. And that particular tract of land that he had to pass through was a very dangerous piece of land, with dense forests like that, and it was actually filled with robbers and thieves like that. And it's explained that even traveling through that land during daytime was dangerous as well, so what to speak of nighttime. So anyway, he happened to be traveling through at nighttime. And then all of a sudden, some thieves, some burglars, they sort of pounced on him. And he was a very old man. And they said, look, give us all your valuables, otherwise we'll kill you. So all he was carrying with him was just a little bit of Lakshmi, a little bit of money. He had a ring, which he used to wear. And he was carrying a little bag with Srimad Bhagavatam. So as soon as they extorted him, they threatened him, these burglars, then he gave them whatever money he had. He took off his ring and he gave them the ring. And then they said, we're not satisfied, you're still holding some bag. What does that bag possess? And he said, this is just Srimad Bhagavatam, it's my dearmost possession. And they didn't believe him. They thought it must be some other valuable because he had already given them the ring and the money. So then they snatched that bag from him. And because to this devotee, Punantan, something like that, that's his name. Because to that devotee, Srimad Bhagavatam was an even more valuable commodity than just Lakshmi and the ring that he had. At that point in time, when they stole that bag with his Srimad Bhagavatam, he loudly cried out the name of Narayan, the name of Krishna, raising his hands up in the air. Please save me, please help me. They've stolen my Srimad Bhagavatam. Just at that moment, riding on a horse, there came the minister, one of the ministers of a local king. And he came wielding a sword and a shield. And there was a fight which ensued between these robbers and this person, this minister who had come riding on a horseback. And he scared them off. So these bandits, they ran away. And they gave the money and the ring back to this sadhu. And then the sadhu, he thanked this horseback warrior which had come. thank you for saving my life. And as a token of my appreciation, I would like to give you this ring. It belongs to me, but I'd like to give you this ring. And, the person on the horseback, he accepted the ring. And then he guided this devotee to the temple. And he said, just follow this path there, and don't worry, it's going to be safe. And by tomorrow morning, you will reach the temple of Guruvayurpan. So then the sadhu continued, and this warrior on the horseback, he disappeared somewhere into the forest. So it's explained that just at that night, that very night that this incident happened, the deity of Guruvayurpan appeared in the dream of the head pujari of that temple. And Guruvayurpan told the pujari that when you wake up tomorrow morning for Mangalarti and you come into the altar, you'll see around my finger there'll be a ring. And my devotee, the sadhu who is coming to the temple, he'll be coming tomorrow morning for Mangalarti to take my darshan. You are to take this ring off my finger and give it to him. So, promptly, as he always used to do, this devotee, he came for Mangalarti to the temple of Guruvayurpan. The curtains opened, and immediately the pujari ran out before even the arti started, and he gave this ring to this devotee who was standing right at the front. He said, I had a dream that, Krishna told me to give you this ring. The deity told me to give you this ring. And when he saw that ring, he saw that it was the exact same ring that he had given to that warrior on the horseback who had saved him in the jungle. So his realization was exactly that I was in danger. Krishna himself came disguised as this warrior on the horseback, this minister of the local king. And Krishna himself fought with these bandits and drove them away just so I could come the next morning for the darshan of Guruvayurpan. So when Srila Prabhupada is saying that our activities should be so transcendentally saturated that Krishna will be kind enough to look favorably upon us and engage in his devotional service, so we can see this was the devotion of this particular devotee. He spent his whole life of 90 or so years intensely absorbed in devotion to Krishna, so transcendently absorbed that Krishna himself came and saved him. So like that, there's many stories like that, but this was an interesting story which I hadn't heard of before. So we'll finish here. Any quick question or comment? Okay, thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.